Every Sunday morning, a 79-year-old woman in Bari feeds 10 people breakfast for less than $5. Not coffee and a biscuit. A casserole deep enough to lose your fork in. Eggs and bread and potatoes baked until the top crackles, like a drum skin. And every single person at that table leaves full. But here's what nobody standing behind her at the market realizes. This recipe wasn't invented to save money. It was invented to survive a winter when there was no money at all, and the ingredient that makes it work costs nothing, because everyone else throws it away. Her name is Maria. She's been making this dish for 61 years, and if you want to understand how it's possible, you have to get up when she does. 6:40 in the morning, and the market on Via Nicolai is still setting up. The fish sellers are shouting. The air smells like diesel and wet cardboard, and underneath it, bread. Maria walks past the good stalls without slowing down. She's not here for the good stalls. She's here for the baker at the end of the row, the one with yesterday's loaves stacked in a plastic crate by his feet. And she buys the biggest one for 50 cents. A loaf that sold for €3 24 hours ago. Rock hard now. Useless if you ask almost anyone. Then 8 eggs, $2.40. 2 fat potatoes, 62 cents. 1 onion, 28 cents. And the heel of a pecorino wheel, the dried out end piece the cheese man can't sell to tourists, for 90 cents. Add it up, $4.70. And she's walking home before the church bells ring 7. So how does that become breakfast for 10 grown appetites? That's where the stale bread comes in. And this is the part that would get her laughed out of a cooking show. She doesn't soften it in milk. Milk costs money. She softens it in water, plain tap water, torn into chunks and pressed down with both hands until the bread drinks it up and turns back into something almost alive. Her mother taught her this, and her mother learned it in a kitchen where milk was something you heard about. The trick is the squeeze. You wring each handful out like laundry, hard, until your knuckles go white, because wet bread makes soup and squeezed bread makes structure. Get it right and the bread disappears into the eggs completely. Nobody at the table will ever know that half of what's filling them up was headed for a bin behind a bakery. The potatoes go in raw, sliced so thin you could read through them. She does it with a knife older than her marriage, no mandolin, thumb riding the blade in a way that would make a safety inspector leave the room. The onion gets cooked slow in olive oil until it's sweet, and then, this is the move, she pours that hot oil straight into the eggs, all of it. The oil is not a cooking medium in this house, it's an ingredient. It carries the onion into every corner of the dish so that each bite tastes rich, even though the whole pan holds less cheese than an American sandwich. 8 eggs, beaten until her arm complains. The squeezed bread, the onions and their oil, the pecorino grated down to the rind, and even the rind goes in, buried in the middle where it melts into a hidden seam of salt, layered with the potatoes into a dented aluminum pan that predates the Italian Republic. 45 minutes at a low oven, because a hot oven seizes eggs, and a patient one turns them into custard. While it bakes, you have time to ask the real question. Where does a dish like this actually come from? Not from a cookbook. You will not find Maria's casserole written down anywhere, and that absence is the whole story. In Puglia, they call this kind of cooking cucina, povera, the kitchen of the poor, and it sounds romantic now, printed on menus in Milan next to €28 plates. It was not romantic. It was arithmetic performed by women under pressure. No restaurant will ever reproduce. In the years after the war, southern Italy was one of the poorest corners of Europe, and a family's week could hinge on whether the woman running the kitchen could turn nothing into something 11 times in a row. Maria's mother could. She raised 8 children in 2 rooms in the old town, and Sunday breakfast came out of this same pan. Some weeks there were 8 eggs, some weeks there were 4, and more bread and more water, and nobody said a word about it. The dish flexed. That was its genius. It expanded and contracted around whatever the week had allowed, and it always came to the table looking generous. Looking generous mattered. Her mother used to say that hunger you can survive, but shame at your own table, that eats a family from the inside. Yeah, sit with that one for a second. And it worked. All 8 children grew up. Maria can still name what each sibling did to earn their place at that pan, who fetched the water, who was sent to charm the baker into the day-old price. She was the baker's girl. 61 years later, she is still, technically, negotiating with the same bakery. Different baker, same crate. Now watch what happens to the math when the casserole comes out of the oven. 10 servings from $4.70 is 47 cents a person. A single box of branded cereal and the milk to drown it runs a family of 10 past $12 in one sitting, and they're hungry again by 10 o'clock. Maria's version holds a farmhand until lunch. Protein from the eggs, slow-burning starch from the bread and potatoes, fat from the oil. A sports scientist would call it a balanced macro profile. Maria calls it breakfast, and she'd like the sports scientist to sit down and stop hovering. By 8:30, the family starts arriving. 2 sons, their wives, 5 grandchildren, and 1 neighbor who has been just passing by every Sunday since 1998. Absolute coincidence, right? The pan lands in the middle of the table on a folded towel, and nobody serves themselves until Maria cuts the first square, which is the law, and the law is enforced with a look. But there's one thing at this table more valuable than the recipe, and until last spring it was in danger of disappearing. None of it is written down. Not the squeeze, not the oil trick, not the buried rind. For 61 years, the entire method has existed in one place, in the hands of one woman who is 79 years old. Her sons never learned it. Cooking was not asked of them, which she now admits was her mistake. And so the most durable piece of engineering her family owns, a machine for turning 50-cent bread into abundance, tested through the worst decade in Puglia's memory, was one bad winter away from vanishing entirely. Then her 16-year-old granddaughter Lucia asked to learn. So now there are 2 of them at the counter on Sunday mornings, and Maria teaches the way she was taught, which means Lucia's wet bread gets inspected and rejected until the squeeze is right. No measurements are ever spoken, because there are none. The lesson is in the hands. Last month, for the first time, Lucia made the whole thing alone while her grandmother sat at the kitchen table and drank her coffee and pretended not to supervise. The family ate it. Nobody could tell the difference. Maria could tell the difference, she says, but she won't say what it was, and she was smiling when she said it. Here's what stays with you after you leave that kitchen. Every family used to hold knowledge like this, a skill sharpened by hard years and handed down at a counter, and most of us let ours go without noticing. one convenient purchase at a time. Maria's casserole survived because one teenager asked one question before it was too late. So think about your own family. Somewhere in it, there's a pan like hers. Who's learning what your grandmother knows? And what happens to it if the answer is no one? Tell me in the comments, because next week we're in Naples, where one Nonna feeds 12 people dinner from a pot that hasn't been empty since March.